there! A number of you have asked me recently about this bel canto concept of inalare la voce, to inhale the voice. You're wondering what it's all about and what are its potential or intended benefits. And so in this video I'm going to answer those questions. So while it's generally accepted that inalare la voce is intended to be an imagery to help encourage us to assume a nice open-throated posture and not try to force the sound out by leaning on the muscles of the throat, it appears as though there are some teachers who have interpreted it to be a literal inhalation during phonation, sort of a circular breathing. So when I was studying with my former singing teacher, he was studying under Edward Johnson, and he was passing everything that he was learning from Edward Johnson down to me. And it's very clear that Edward Johnson is one of those teachers, or was, I'm not sure if he's still around, was one of those teachers who believed that this is a literal inhalation during phonation. I'm going to share a couple clips from a masterclass taught by Edward Johnson in which he discusses this concept of inalare la voce, and you're going to see that he really talks about it as a literal circular breathing type action in which the expired breath, the breath that's coming out of the lungs, meets the breath that's coming in from the mouth, and those two streams of breath, so to speak, are recirculating. And the excess air is then sort of filtering out through the nasal cavities, through the nasal passages.
If I asked you to inhale breath up onto the roof of your mouth without singing and you went, you would feel a stream of breath hitting the roof of the mouth. Now, when a singer exhales the voice, what they are actually doing is exhaling breath through the mouth, out toward the audience. Now, in order to inhale a voice, you do the opposite of that. You inhale. Now, this is an actual inhalation of breath, but you don't think of it as breath. You think of it as being your voice or your sound. Now, this inhalation of the voice is the means by which the breath which is going to come out of your lungs is brought out of the lungs in a controlled stream. In other words, the amount of inhalation I achieve by sucking in up onto my roof of my mouth in turn pulls exactly the same amount of breath out of my lungs, up through my vocal cords, into my head to create my sound. In other words, I have two streams of breath involved here. This stream of breath that I'm sucking in, I do not think of as breath, I think of it as being my voice or my sound. That stream of breath in turn sucks the breath out of the lungs up into the head where the two streams meet, okay? Now, I can liken this to two rivers flowing toward one another. The two rivers flow toward one another and they meet and become one river. It's what is known as a confluence of waters, to be scientific. The two rivers meet and become one. Now, what action should I expect to get in the water at the point where those two rivers meet and become one? A whirlpool, yes, a turbulence, okay? And in a way, that is what I get when I suck in here, and that in turn pulls breath out of my lungs. I get a rolling of the voice, a resonation of the voice, okay? Now, the breath that has been sucked in and the breath that has come out of my lungs has to escape from my head somehow, okay? Now, the breath cannot go out through my mouth because I am sucking inwards. It can't go out my ears, there's no connection, okay? It has to escape from my head. It escapes from my head by going up through the sinus cavities, down through the nostrils, and out through the nose.
In the description box below, I've included a link to this masterclass so that you can check it out in its entirety after you finish watching this video. So I'm sure that you've read from Laperti this idea of singing on the gesture of inhalation. It's just the gesture, but we have inspiratory postures in both the throat and down here. And so when we inhale through our mouths, nice and deeply, the soft palate goes up, the pharyngeal constrictor muscles release so that the pharynx dilates, the tongue root leans up against the anterior wall of the throat, so it's out of the way, and the larynx descends, which in turn opens up the wider base of the pharynx. And that's the posture that we're supposed to sing on, at least when we're using this concept. And there's the second component, right down here. I know I've talked about this idea of the inspiratory hold in a previous video. Basically, we're singing on the gesture of inhalation down here. So when we inhale, the ribs open up and the diaphragm descends. And so when we're practicing this idea of inalare la voce, we're trying to ensure that we're maintaining a little bit of this lateral expansion through a part of the vocal phrase, so that prevents the diaphragm from springing up and generating too high subglottal pressure, which then forces the larynx up, and then the throat starts to narrow. And the idea behind this is to avoid any kind of throat constriction. Because when we think about forcing our voice out or pushing it out of us, we start to lean on the muscles of the throat. We start to push and we start to squeeze, and everything starts to get tight, and we lose that resonating space. But when we're inhaling, everything's nice and open. So when we're singing on this gesture of inhalation, we're singing as though we're still inhaling, with that nice open throat posture. And when we do that, the throat releases. And there are acoustical benefits, because now we have a larger resonating space. And now the vowel is allowed to resonate more fully and more effectively. So we get better resonance. And the voice will become enlarged, and it will carry, it'll project, without our having to push and force to make that happen. So it's really about working smarter, not harder. And it's a little bit of a counterintuitive kind of action. Because again, we're thinking, oh, we need to make our voices heard. So the tendency is to want to push and force and try to project our voices, instead of engaging a ton of muscle and trying to force and push to try to make our voices carry. We're relying on resonance. We're building a really good resonator here and allowing the voice to resonate fully. And that is what's going to enlarge the voice. That's what's going to help the voice to carry. I do believe that this concept is applicable to commercial styles of singing. We don't take the openness of the throat to the same extremes that classical singers do, but this is a very, very effective imagery for us to use, especially when we're trying to release tensions, throat constriction, for singers who tend to really hyper-engage the circumlaryngeal muscles, and they get a lot of supraglottal constriction and hyperfunction. For those singers, this concept of inhaling the voice works very, very effectively for releasing those tensions. It takes a little bit of time, but the more they practice, the more muscle memory they get. It's going to start to release those throat muscles. So it's basically the posture of deep inhalation through the mouth, or as though you're sort of taken by pleasant surprise. It's an inspired kind of posture, so that you're inspired to sing. All right, I hope this answers your questions. Please let me know if you have any other questions. Leave them in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to try to answer them as soon as possible, maybe even make a second video if I feel as though I need to. In the meantime, please click the thumbs up button on this video, and also subscribe to this channel so that you'll receive notifications the next time I get videos up. Thank you so much for watching.